Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Dan Fouts is the greatest quarterback in the history of the Chargers, and I think that goes without saying. However, if you ask people who the second best quarterback of all time was, you would probably get quite a few people, especially those who were around back then, who would say it's not Philip Rivers, but rather John Hadl. In his 11 seasons in San Diego, Hadl was one of the best quarterbacks in the AFL. He made 5 Pro Bowls and All-Star games with the Chargers, led his league in passing yards 3 times, led the Chargers to multiple AFL championship appearances, and finished as the league leader in touchdowns in 1968 and 1971. Head coach Sid Gillman thought the world of Hadl, and rightfully so. The Chargers consistently had one of the top offenses in the league with him under center. And Gillman loved him so much that he went as far back as saying in 1968, "I wouldn't trade Hadl for any other quarterback in pro football." But 1 year before, in 1967, that nearly happened. In 1967, John Hadl was so fed up with Sid Gillman and the Chargers that he wanted to be traded. He would never play another down for the Chargers again. And this is the story behind the drama between Gillman and Hadl, and how Hadl was dangerously close to leaving the Chargers. Before I talk about why Hadl wanted out, we need some context as to what Hadl was doing before the 1966 season when everything went south. In 1962, the San Diego Chargers drafted John Hadl out of Kansas. Even though Hadl got drafted in the first round by the Detroit Lions in the NFL, Hadl decided that he was going to play in San Diego. However, things didn't exactly start off well for him. During that 1962 season, Hadl started 10 games and the Chargers went just 1-9 over that stretch. Considering the fact that the Chargers had come off of back-to-back AFL West Division titles and back-to-back appearances in the league championship, the fact that the Chargers struggled this much with Hadl was not a good sign. After a rough rookie year, Hadl did not start any games for the Chargers in 1963. The team acquired former Packers great Tobin Rote and started him for the entire season, and the move paid off, as the Chargers wound up winning their first title in franchise history, defeating the Boston Patriots in the AFL Championship. But even though things looked bleak for the youngster, by the middle of 1964, Hadl was back into the starting lineup, even despite his struggles. And even though Gillman wasn't always pleased with him, as he was on record saying that he was discouraged with his lack of progress and didn't know if he would make it, Gillman still loved the guy, and referred to him as the best young quarterback in football. And on October 18, 1964, in his first start in nearly 2 years, Hadl was on fire against the Broncos, throwing for 2 touchdowns and no picks, while posting a 111.6 passer rating in a 42-14 victory. From that point on, the legend of John Hadl began. Broncos head coach Max Speedy called the Chargers under Hadl the most outstanding offensive team in football, and man was he right. Under Hadl, the Chargers went 6-2, and Hadl, despite only playing half the season, still found a way to finish 4th in the league in touchdowns. Hadl started every game for the Chargers in 1965, made another All-Star game, and led the league in passing yards while guiding the Chargers to a 9-2-3 record, another first-place finish in the AFL West, and another appearance in the league championship. It seemed like everything was great at this point. Gillman loved Hadl, and Hadl was crushing it with the Chargers. Unfortunately, everything went downhill in 1966. There was one element in particular about Gillman that Hadl did not love, and that was his impulsive nature. In a retrospective interview Hadl did more than 30 years after the fact, he said that Sid was very impulsive, and it often led him to make bad decisions. That was just who he was, and while it wasn't really a problem when Hadl got there, by 1966, something was about to happen that made Hadl's relationship with the team sour. Through the first 3 games under Hadl, the Chargers were 3-0. Hadl had only thrown 1 pick in those games, and in one game against the Bills, completed over 77% of his passes while posting a passer rating of 140.7. Once again, the Chargers were one of the best offensive teams in pro football, and to make it 4 straight wins, they were going to take on the Miami Dolphins at home. Miami was an expansion team who hadn't won all year, and had just allowed 58 points to the Buffalo Bills. But Hadl came out of the gate struggling. In the first half, he was 6 for 11 with 62 yards passing, no touchdowns and a pick, and the Chargers trailed 10-6 at the half. Remember, Hadl was an all-star in each of the past 2 years and was considered one of the best quarterbacks in pro football. But after one bad half of football, Gillman decided to pull him for second-year quarterback Steve Tennessee. After Tennessee came off the bench and threw 4 touchdown passes while posting a 156.2 passer rating, leading the Chargers to a 44-10 victory, Gillman decided to give Tennessee the start the following week, with no explanation whatsoever. Just like that, Hadl lost his job. Except after Tennessee was atrocious in the starting job, posting a 6.2 passer rating, while completing just 2 passes in a losing effort, Hadl was reinserted back into the starting lineup. That would teach Gillman to never do that again, right? Not quite, because even though Hadl threw 2 touchdown passes in each of his next 4 starts, after a 41-19 loss to the Oakland Raiders, Hadl got yanked again for Tennessee. Rotating quarterbacks on a game-by-game basis is never a recipe for success, but for Gillman to be doing this when he had one of the best quarterbacks in football really got on Hadl's nerves. And the worst part of it all was that this strategy not only backfired from a mental standpoint, but it backfired in the win-loss column. After starting 4-0, the Chargers went just 3-6-1 over the final 10 games, missing the playoffs and finishing 3rd in the AFL West, well behind the Kansas City Chiefs atop the division. In the 2 games that Tennessee started, the Chargers lost both of them, and even though Hadl had a career-best year in yards, touchdowns, and passer rating, he didn't feel secure. He was fed up. And with that, the Chargers franchise quarterback demanded a trade. Before I go any further, I have to make it very clear that Sid Gillman wasn't going anywhere. There are some situations that look irreparable and then the player drops the grievance after the coach gets fired, but Gillman was not getting fired, and rightfully so. There's a reason that Gillman is in the Hall of Fame and is considered one of the greatest masterminds in the history of the sport. In fact, during the middle of that 1966 season, the Chargers gave Gillman a 5-year extension, with owner Gene Klein saying, "We've torn up the old contract and given him a new one at a substantial increase in salary." With Gillman not going anywhere, they made it very obvious for Hadl that he needed to get out. Al Koopi, the sports director at Kogo, a radio station in San Diego, said at the start of 1967 that Hadl wouldn't play another season for Gillman. As Koopi said, he said all he can stomach from Gillman. Hadl reportedly demanded to be traded, and if he didn't get traded, he was going to retire and become a coach. Keep in mind that Hadl spent his offseason working with the coaching staff at Kansas, so he already had an easy into that industry if he wanted it. 2 days later, Hadl confirmed the reports himself. He said that not only did he want to change, but that it was very important that Gillman traded him to another team, because they didn't get along well, and it was time for a change. Hadl even threw out the Houston Oilers as a possible destination that he'd be interested in. While Hadl denied the reports that he was considering retirement, he said that Gillman assured him that he was going to be traded, since getting out of San Diego was that important to him. Part of it was the troublesome relationship from the events that transpired in 1966. Part of it was just a clash of ideology. Part of it could be that the Chargers seemed like a sinking ship, with Gillman even admitting that the team's drafts in 1963 and 1964 were not that good, and maybe Hadl just won it off. Whatever the case, this relationship was clearly fractured, and was not going to be repaired. However, something changed behind the scenes, because as it turns out, Hadl was going to continue to play under Gillman for a really, really long time. This is a perfect example of just how different coverage of sports was back in the 1960s, because I legitimately could not find anything about why Hadl decided to change his mind or when he did. All I could find was his preview of the upcoming 1967 AFL season, where it said that Gillman and Hadl settled their differences. That's it. And this is an all-star starting quarterback and a Hall of Fame coach we're talking about here, and there's nothing as to why Hadl changed his mind whatsoever. However, considering the fact that the Chargers did not draft a quarterback in 1967, we can assume that between those quotes in January and the NFL-AFL draft in March, something got hashed out. And I think it's safe to say that the Chargers are really glad that these differences were hashed out, because Hadl only continued to get better. In 1967, he started all 14 games for San Diego. There was no funny business, he was playing them all. Hadl set a career high at the time in both passing touchdowns with 24 and passing yards with 3,365. In 1968, he set another career high in yards and touchdowns and actually led the AFL in both of those categories, along with completions, while receiving All-Star honors for the 3rd time in his career. He received All-Star honors again in 1969, led the NFL in completions, yards, and touchdowns in 1971 while also being named the NFL Man of the Year, and made the Pro Bowl in 1972, which would be his last season in San Diego before being traded to the Rams. John Hadl isn't getting into the Hall of Fame, but I think if any quarterback belongs in the Hall of Very Good as a first ballot inductee, Hadl is an excellent candidate. He played over a decade in San Diego and is a club legend, even if no one associates the 21 jersey with him anymore. When you think of the greatest quarterbacks in AFL history, right up there with Len Dawson and Joe Namath sits this man. And to think that his 11-year stint with the Chargers was awfully close to only being a 5-year stint. It's crazy to think about how AFL history and Chargers history would have changed forever if Hadl got his wish, because in 1967, he was that close to leaving San Diego. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaroGator9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.